Welcome to our channel, where we break down the most impactful news of the day. Today, we turn our attention to Rachel Reeves, the Chancellor of the Exchequer, whose economic policies, once hailed as a blueprint for recovery, are now facing unprecedented levels of criticism. Before we dive in, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel to become part of our growing community. Rachel Reeves, initially celebrated for her bold and visionary economic approach, now finds herself at the center of a storm. Her much-touted spending review, branded as Phase 2, has set off alarm bells across various sectors, from political corridors to business boardrooms. This review, spearheaded by Chief Secretary to the Treasury John Jones, has been framed as a zero-based assessment of all government spending, aiming to prioritize ruthlessly and move away from traditional budgetary planning. However, while key priorities like the NHS and early education have been safeguarded, other critical areas such as local councils, social welfare, and the judiciary are bracing for substantial cuts. The fallout from these decisions is already palpable. Business confidence has plummeted, inflation remains stubbornly high, and the British pound continues to weaken. A recent survey revealed that 26% of Britain's top CFOs now hold a more pessimistic outlook on the economy, marking a stark shift not seen since the turbulent year of 2023. Adding fuel to the fire, Reeves has introduced a controversial £40 billion tax hike, including an increase in national insurance contributions. This move has drawn sharp criticism from figures like Conservative Shadow Chancellor Mel Stride, who accused her of stifling economic growth and quelling the entrepreneurial spirit that drives the nation's prosperity. Rupert S.S., the chairman of the Confederation of British Industry, CBI, has also voiced serious concerns. He warned that Reeves's measures are bruising trust within the business community. Highlighting a £22 billion fiscal gap identified during the budget, he argued that Labour's attempts to fill this hole have merely created another, one of eroded confidence and trust in the government's ability to foster economic stability. According to Rupert, Reeves's strategies are not just economic missteps but potential long-term barriers to recovery. The challenges Reeves faces extend beyond numbers and forecasts. Her zero-based budgeting approach, while ambitious in theory, has unsettled traditional stakeholders accustomed to more predictable allocations. Departments with unprotected budgets, such as local councils, are grappling with the reality of having to slash vital services. Welfare programs face uncertainty, and the judiciary is under strain to maintain operations amid dwindling resources. Meanwhile, protected areas like the NHS and education, though spared from the immediate cuts, are struggling to make meaningful progress due to inefficient allocation of front-loaded funds. The economic repercussions of these policies are rippling across the nation. Inflation, a persistent headache for households, is not cooling as quickly as analysts had hoped. With wages failing to keep up and the cost of living crisis deepening, public sentiment is turning sour. At the same time, the weakening pound signals growing unease among international investors, further dampening prospects for a swift recovery. Financial markets are reacting cautiously, with borrowing costs for the government steadily rising, eroding the fiscal flexibility Reeves once relied upon. Critics argue that Reeves's decision to raise taxes amid these conditions has exacerbated an already precarious situation. Mel Stride's accusation of taxing the daylights out of businesses resonates with many who see these policies as a deterrent to growth and innovation. Small and medium-sized enterprises, SMEs, often referred to as the backbone of the British economy, are particularly vulnerable. Struggling with higher operating costs and reduced consumer spending, these businesses are finding it increasingly difficult to stay afloat. Rupert S.'s assertion that Labour's approach is creating a hole in trust strikes at the heart of the issue. Beyond economic metrics, the perception of stability and confidence is crucial for any government. Reeves's policies, rather than reassuring the business community, seem to be driving a wedge between Downing Street and key stakeholders. The £22 billion fiscal gap, described by Rupert as a ticking time bomb, highlights the fragility of Labour's fiscal strategy. Critics warn that filling such gaps through short-term fixes, like aggressive taxation, risks further alienating businesses and undermining the broader economy. Adding to the complexity, Reeves has doubled down on her fiscal strategy despite mounting criticism. During a recent trip to China, she dismissed concerns about her policies, calling them non-negotiable and reiterating her commitment to meeting strict fiscal rules. While this unwavering stance may appeal to some as a display of strength, others see it as a sign of inflexibility that could lead to political and economic fallout. Reeves's trip, aimed at fostering international partnerships, was overshadowed by questions about her domestic policies and their long-term viability. The broader implications of these decisions are becoming increasingly apparent. Sir Keir Starmer, leader of the Labour Party, has attempted to shift the narrative by focusing on futuristic projects like building a UK supercomputer and advancing artificial intelligence initiatives. However, even his closest allies admit that these ambitious goals are a tough sell amidst the economic turbulence. The public, grappling with immediate challenges like inflation and stagnant growth, is unlikely to be swayed by promises of high-tech advancements. Reeves's policies, while rooted in principles of fiscal responsibility, are teetering on the edge. Analysts are divided on the way forward. Some suggest that easing inflationary pressures and a potential uptick in summer growth could salvage her economic vision. Others, however, warn that the damage to public trust and business confidence may be too severe to overcome. With her upcoming speech anticipated as a make-or-break moment, the stakes could not be higher. The Labour Party as a whole faces significant challenges. Internally, divisions are emerging over the direction of Reeves's economic strategy. Externally, the Conservatives are seizing the opportunity to highlight these missteps as evidence of Labour's inability to govern effectively. The narrative of a party out of touch with the needs of businesses and ordinary citizens is gaining traction. In the end, the question remains, can Rachel Reeves weather the storm and steer the UK economy back on course, or will her policies be remembered as a political gamble that failed to pay off? Only time will tell, but the stakes, for Reeves, for Labour, and for the country, are undeniably high. Amid the storm, Rachel Reeves shows no signs of backing down. In fact, during her recent trip to China, she dismissed mounting criticism and categorically described her policies as non-negotiable. This unyielding stance reflects her confidence in her fiscal strategy, but it has also amplified tensions within the Labour Party. As Reeves holds firm, other prominent figures in her party, such as Health Secretary Wes Streeting, have begun calling for patience. Yet, the cracks in Labour's economic vision are becoming increasingly difficult to ignore, and the pressure on Reeves continues to mount. Her approach has significantly reduced the government's fiscal flexibility, particularly as rising borrowing costs strain the Treasury. For some, the promise of economic recovery remains on the horizon, with certain analysts suggesting that easing inflation and potential summer growth could restore stability. However, others warn that Reeves's rigid approach might evolve into a fatal political misstep. The stakes are higher than ever, not just for her but for the entire Labour leadership, as doubts grow regarding their capacity to manage the nation's finances during these turbulent times. Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer has tried to shift public focus away from the economic turbulence by promoting ambitious initiatives, such as building a state-of-the-art British supercomputer and increasing investments in artificial intelligence. However, even Starmer's closest allies admit that persuading the public to support such forward-looking projects is an uphill battle when the immediate economic realities dominate everyday life. The British public is grappling with high inflation, stagnant wages, and a cost-of-living crisis that shows no sign of abating. In such a climate, long-term technological aspirations may appear tone-deaf to many voters. Reeves's inflexibility has drawn criticism not only from her opposition but also from within Labour's ranks. Some party insiders privately express concern that her insistence on adhering to strict fiscal rules might backfire. They argue that Reeves's refusal to adapt her policies to the evolving economic landscape risks alienating key stakeholders, including voters, businesses, and even international investors. While Reeves insists that her strategy is rooted in sound financial principles, the lack of tangible progress is raising questions about whether her gamble will ultimately pay off. Meanwhile, this economic crisis does not exist in isolation. Broader social and cultural issues are also coming to the forefront, further complicating Labour's efforts to present a cohesive vision for the future. A recent report revealed that a Liberal Democrat-led council in London had banned the use of the term Christian name in an effort to promote inclusivity. While the move was intended to foster equality, it has been widely criticised as an example of extreme hypersensitivity. Critics argue that such policies distract from more pressing issues and contribute to the growing perception of a government that is out of touch with everyday concerns. The backlash against these measures underscores the challenge of balancing economic priorities with social initiatives. Labour, already struggling to maintain public trust in its economic policies, now faces accusations of being overly focused on symbolic gestures rather than substantive action. This perceived disconnect could further erode the party's support, particularly among voters who feel left behind by the government's failure to address bread-and-butter issues like inflation, housing affordability, and job security. At the heart of Labour's struggle lies a fundamental question: how can the party reconcile its ambitious vision for the future with the harsh realities of the present? Reeves's steadfast commitment to her fiscal strategy may resonate with those who value discipline and consistency, but it risks alienating others who expect a more flexible and responsive approach to governance. The tension between these competing priorities reflects a deeper divide within Labour, one that could have lasting implications for its ability to govern effectively. Adding to this complexity is the growing skepticism among the business community. Reeves's economic policies, particularly her decision to raise £40 billion in taxes, have drawn sharp criticism from industry leaders. Businesses, already grappling with rising costs and a challenging economic environment, see these tax hikes as yet another obstacle to growth and innovation. The lack of trust between Labour and the private sector is becoming increasingly apparent, and reversing this trend will require more than rhetorical assurances. The situation is further exacerbated by public dissatisfaction with the government's handling of the cost of living crisis. For many households, the combination of high inflation and stagnant wages has created a sense of economic insecurity that no amount of long-term planning can immediately alleviate. Labour's inability to offer immediate relief is fueling discontent and providing ammunition for its political opponents, who are quick to capitalise on the party's perceived failures. Even within Labour's inner circle, there are whispers of unease about Reeves's approach. While some admire her resolve, others worry that her unwillingness to compromise could lead to lasting damage. The debate over whether to stick with her current strategy or pivot to a more flexible approach is intensifying, with no clear resolution in sight. For Reeves, the challenge is not just defending her policies but also convincing her colleagues and the public that her vision is the right path forward. Meanwhile, Keir Starmer's attempts to shift the narrative have met with limited success. His focus on high-tech projects, while visionary, has failed to capture the imagination of a public that is more concerned with immediate economic challenges. The disconnect between Labour's lofty aspirations and the everyday realities faced by ordinary Britons is becoming increasingly difficult to bridge. As Starmer tries to rally support for his vision, the shadow of economic instability looms large over his leadership. Reeves's recent visit to China, intended to strengthen international ties and showcase Labour's global ambitions, was overshadowed by domestic concerns. Her dismissal of criticism as noise may have played well on the international stage, but it did little to address the growing unease at home. Critics argue that her focus on fiscal discipline at the expense of flexibility is emblematic of a government that is more concerned with appearances than with delivering real results. As Labour navigates these turbulent waters, the stakes could not be higher. For Reeves, the pressure to deliver tangible results is mounting, and her upcoming speech will likely be a critical moment in determining her political future. For the party as a whole, the challenge is to present a unified front and regain the trust of a public that is increasingly skeptical of its ability to govern effectively. In the end, the question remains: can Labour reconcile its ambitious vision for the future with the immediate needs of the present? The answer will not only shape the fate of Rachel Reeves but also determine the direction of the party and the country in the years to come. For now, Labour's economic strategy remains a polarising issue, one that continues to divide opinion and test the limits of political resilience. Whether Reeves's unyielding approach will be seen as a mark of strength or a fatal flaw remains to be seen. As Rachel Reeves prepares to address mounting concerns in an upcoming speech, the future of the Labour Party hangs in the balance. Internal divisions and growing dissatisfaction with her economic policies threaten to shake the foundations of the British political landscape. While some observers see glimmers of hope in a potential slowdown in inflation and a possible economic recovery, others believe Reeves's high-stakes approach may ultimately prove too risky for both her and her party. The Conservative Party has already begun to capitalise on Labour's perceived missteps, positioning itself as the viable alternative for economic recovery. However, this battle extends beyond fiscal matters. Labour is facing challenges on multiple fronts, from debates over inclusive language in local councils to widespread dissatisfaction with national policies. These controversies are testing the party's ability to maintain focus and present a cohesive vision to the public. The political landscape is further complicated by broader cultural dynamics. Public figures like the Duke and Duchess of Sussex are grappling with their roles, trying to strike a balance between humanitarian efforts and the entertainment world. Their struggle for identity in a rapidly changing society mirrors, in many ways, the challenges faced by the Labour Party. Both are navigating a complex environment where maintaining relevance requires delicate balancing acts, and the risk of losing direction is ever present. Rachel Reeves finds herself at the epicenter of this uncertainty. Her rigid commitment to fiscal discipline has alienated segments of her own party and the electorate, yet she remains steadfast in her belief that her policies are the key to long-term stability. Critics, however, argue that her approach lacks the flexibility needed to address the immediate economic struggles faced by ordinary Britons. With inflation still uncomfortably high, wages stagnant, and the cost of living crisis worsening, many question whether Labour's leadership truly understands the urgency of the situation. The stakes are further heightened by the Conservatives' growing confidence. With Labour under fire, the Tories have seized the opportunity to present themselves as the party of pragmatic solutions. Their messaging focuses on contrasting Reeves's perceived rigidity with what they claim is a more adaptable and business-friendly approach. This narrative has begun to resonate with voters who are increasingly frustrated with Labour's inability to deliver immediate relief. Within Labour, these tensions are creating fissures. While Reeves's allies praise her resolve, others within the party express concerns about the political cost of her inflexibility. The debate over whether to double down on her current strategy or pivot toward a more flexible approach reflects deeper divisions within Labour's leadership. For Reeves, the upcoming speech represents a pivotal moment, not just for her career, but for the party's broader credibility. Meanwhile, the broader societal debates playing out across the country add another layer of complexity. Recent controversies over inclusive language guidelines in local councils, for instance, have sparked fierce debates about the balance between progressive values and practical governance. Critics argue that such initiatives, though well-intentioned, risk alienating voters who view them as distractions from more pressing economic concerns. This perception of misplaced priorities is a challenge Labour must address if it hopes to regain public trust. At the heart of these debates is a fundamental question about Labour's identity. Is the party capable of bridging the gap between its progressive ambitions and the immediate needs of the electorate? Reeves's fiscal policies, while aimed at long-term stability, have been criticised for failing to offer short-term solutions to the economic pain many households are experiencing. This disconnect between policy and perception underscores the broader challenge Labour faces as it tries to chart a path forward. The Conservatives, in contrast, have been quick to exploit this gap. By focusing on practical issues like tax relief and business incentives, they have positioned themselves as a party more in tune with the economic realities faced by voters. This strategy is particularly effective in an environment where public trust in Labour's economic stewardship is waning. For Reeves and her party, the challenge is not just to defend their policies but to rebuild confidence in their ability to govern effectively. Adding to the complexity is the shifting global economic landscape. Reeves's recent visit to China, intended to showcase Labour's international ambitions, was overshadowed by domestic criticism. While the trip was aimed at fostering economic partnerships, it also highlighted the difficulties Labour faces in balancing its global aspirations with the immediate demands of managing a struggling domestic economy. Critics argue that Reeves's focus on fiscal discipline at the expense of flexibility is emblematic of a government more concerned with optics than with delivering tangible results. The Labour Party's internal dynamics further complicate its ability to navigate these challenges. As Reeves prepares for her speech, she faces the dual challenge of addressing both public concerns and dissent within her own ranks. Her ability to articulate a compelling vision for the future will be critical in determining whether she can regain the trust of voters and her colleagues. However, the risk remains that her speech will be seen as too little, too late, particularly if it fails to address the immediate economic pressures facing the country. Keir Starmer's role in this equation is equally significant. As Labour leader, he must balance his support for Reeves with the need to reassure voters that his party has a clear and effective plan for economic recovery. Starmer's focus on ambitious projects, such as advancing artificial intelligence and building a British supercomputer, reflects his desire to position Labour as a forward-thinking party. However, these initiatives risk being overshadowed by the economic turbulence dominating public discourse. For Reeves, the path forward is fraught with challenges. Her unwavering commitment to her fiscal strategy, while admirable in its consistency, may prove to be a double-edged sword. If her policies fail to deliver tangible results, they could become a symbol of Labour's broader struggles to connect with voters. Conversely, if Reeves can demonstrate that her approach is beginning to yield positive outcomes, she could help restore faith in her leadership and the party's vision. The broader question for Labour is whether it can adapt to the rapidly changing political and economic landscape. The party's ability to navigate these challenges will determine not only its immediate electoral prospects but also its long-term viability as a governing force. For now, the stakes could not be higher, and the pressure on Reeves and her colleagues continues to intensify. As the country waits for Reeves's speech, the future remains uncertain. Will Labour find a way to reconcile its ambitious goals with the pressing needs of the present, or will it be overshadowed by the Conservatives' narrative of pragmatic governance? The answer will shape the political landscape for years to come, and the stakes, for Reeves, for Labour, and for Britain, are undeniably high. Whether Reeves's leadership will be remembered as a bold gamble that paid off or as a cautionary tale of political miscalculation remains to be seen.